Maybe you found yourself in a similar situation before where you thought about learning a new language and you go online just to find some tips or advice on how to get started, and you get bombarded with different methodologies, with different courses, and everyone's telling you something different. It's a lot, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but here are 5 misconceptions that I found to not be true from my experience. You need to live in the country or at least attend a class, because how else would you learn? While being in the country or attending language classes definitely have their benefit, the benefits aren't what you think they are. I mean, think about high school language classes, for example. We took years and years of some languages, and by the end, we could barely hold a conversation. The same goes for people that move to countries, sometimes live there for years and never really pick up on the language. The deciding factor here is your attitude, your motivation, your willingness to learn the language. If you're motivated and dedicated to learn the language, a class can help you bring some more structure into your learning, can give you guidance, and the teacher can answer questions you might have, but they won't make you learn the language. That's something that happens within you. So no, you don't need to be in the country. You don't even need to take a class. You can learn a language on your own. You can't learn a language as an adult. I think this misconception comes from an underlying truth that is interpreted incorrectly. We do know that babies, given enough time, will develop into native speakers of one or multiple languages. And we also know that little kids, 3 to 4 years of age, pick up new languages really, really fast if they move to a new country, for example, or they're raised bilingually. That's because babies have the massive advantage that they don't yet have a mental language model. They don't yet have a default language. So when their parents talk to them, they don't have to constantly think about, oh, is this how it's pronounced in my native language, or do these sounds clash? Is this the right sentence structure, or how would I say this in my native language? Simply because they don't have a native language yet. Whatever they hear is going to become over time their native language. So whatever they hear, there's no right or wrong. There's no, oh, how would this be said differently? But as the years pass, the language that they learn will become their default, and they become native speakers with an unmatched intuition for how that language works. This ability to reach native likeness will diminish as you grow older, and by your teens, yes, it will be a lot harder, if not impossible, to reach the level of a native speaker. But that does not mean that you can't learn a language as an adult. Even though we might not start with this mental blank slate, we can actually make use of the fact that we already know a language, that we already have an understanding of the world, that we already know concepts, that we know how to reason, deduce, infer. These are all things that all adults can do. And language learning is actually a whole lot more fun when approached with an inquisitive mindset, like a detective trying to solve the puzzle of language learning. As a bonus, you don't have to wait for 6 to 8 years to start putting your thoughts into sentences. Language learning is hard. When I tell people that I speak Japanese and lived in Japan for a year, the most common response I get is, oh, wow, isn't Japanese so hard to learn? In reality, it's not really, and neither is learning any other language. I mean, sure, some languages have grammatical features, for example, that take a while to wrap your head around, that just feel unusual. But if you've ever learned a new skill, then you know that that is just how learning new things works. Language learning isn't hard or difficult. It's actually surprisingly simple. It doesn't require you to do all these crazy things all the time. It just requires you to do a few things over a long period of time. And that is what gets people. If you've ever Googled how to learn a language, then you're bombarded with courses promising you fluency in just a month, or fluency in 5 minutes a day, fluency in just 10 minutes, but those are all false promises. Unless you're learning Dutch as a German or Portuguese as a Spanish speaker, then you're not really gonna make tangible progress in the first few months. And that's the hard part about language learning. Language learning is boring and tedious. Nobody likes to do grammar drills and learn vocabulary lists. I think the reason why so many people think that the only way to learn a language is to sit down at your desk and go through your flashcards and copy exercises from your textbook into your notebook is because that is how we were taught in school. our progress in language learning was measured by vocabulary tests. If you got a 9 out of 10, you were making great progress. 7 out of 10, you might want to review some of those cards. 3 out of 10, you didn't really make any progress. And if your idea of what language learning can look like is limited to just this, then yeah, I agree, nobody likes that. But trust me, language learning doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be repetitive and tedious and boring. Language learning can be surprisingly fun, and it might sound crazy, but there are ways to make the process feel more rewarding. And that's part of what I try to show on this channel. I, for example, am a big fan of reading in language learning, which is why for any new language that I start to learn, I will try to find interesting graded readers. And I will challenge myself to start reading from pretty early on, which has become so much easier with online tools like Migaku and Link that provide easy access to instantaneous translations. Other people enjoy jamming to some music and looking up the lyrics. Now, this doesn't mean that you should never learn any vocabulary and never look at a grammar textbook ever, but that discussion is for another day. But there are so many ways to make language learning fun. Duolingo or any app will make you fluent. I know a lot of people love their Duolingo, and I don't think it's the worst thing you can do. You know, it's kind of fun. It gives you an introduction to the basics of the language. It kind of gets you used to at least some sort of consistency, but you have to understand that Duolingo on its own will not make you fluent. Not even close to that. So at some point, sooner rather than later, I highly, really recommend that you go and try to find another resource that can supplement Duolingo or even just replace it. Now, whether that is taking a class or getting a tutor or just following a textbook, I don't think that really matters at that point. But I guarantee you that your 403rd day on Duolingo will not get you any closer to where you want to be than any of the days before. With that being said, these were 5 common misconceptions for language learning that I found to not be true. I will at some point make a second part to this where I talk about some of the common misconceptions in the language learning communities, so definitely stay tuned for that. Also, let me know some of the misconceptions you thought about in the comments down below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.